I'm Csaba Csere, and this is the 2013 BMW X1. BMW introduced the X1 to Europe a few years back, but we didn't get it in this country until this model year. And the reason is simple. Back when it was introduced, the X3 was not that much bigger than the X1. But since then, the X3 has been redone, it's now larger, and there's room in the US model lineup for this X1. Underneath, it's based on the E90, or in other words, the last generation 3 Series. So it's a traditional rear-drive BMW. And anyone who knows BMWs will instantly recognize this car as a member of the tribe. The twin kidney grills identify this car as a BMW. It can't be anything else, especially as big as these grills are on this smallish machine. There's also a vague X formed by these converging hood lines and the rising lines from the black front valence. And all of the BMW X cars have that. And from the side, you can see this strong rising character line that runs pretty much the full length of the car and definitely conveys kind of a forward energy. There's also this rising belt line, and this is characteristic of all BMWs. It's a little softer on the X1 than it is on the sedan, but this Hofmeister kink immediately identifies the car as a BMW. This one's also a Sportline car, has 18-inch wheels with twin spokes, and all of this together conveys a sense of speed and energy that is pure BMW, even in an SUV. The fact that you can see my entire head above the roof of this X1 conveys how small this car is. If you compare it to the BMW X3, the next model in the lineup, it's actually 5 inches lower, it's about 7 inches shorter, and it's 3 inches narrower. It's a remarkably compact SUV. In fact, as low as it is, it really doesn't qualify as an SUV at all. What it is a car that's about as small as the 3 Series was 2 generations ago. And it's a perfect size for people who really like their cars to be premium but small. Let's see how it drives. Driving position and visibility is great in this X1. In front of you is a simple instrument cluster, no LCD screens, 2 mechanical gauges with a little bit of electronic display in between. In fact, it looks very much like the instrument cluster from the last generation 3 Series. You can see it perfectly through the top of the steering wheel. The steering wheel itself on this Sportline car is a nice, thick rimmed leather covered wheel. It just fits really well. It's got a few buttons on it. It has this nice aluminum trim. It's all in the BMW sporty vein. One other thing I particularly like on this X1 is that the cruise control switch is the stalk just below the turn signal stalk. And that's the way all BMWs used to be. On the new ones, unfortunately, they're going to some buttons on the steering wheel here, and I think those are actually harder to use without looking at them than the stalk. But this is one of the last new BMWs available with the stalk type cruise control. This particular X1 has the Sportline option, and a lot of that is cosmetic, but one aspect of it is 18-inch wheels and tires, which are lower profile. And as we go down this road, you can feel that we're picking up some of the bumps, but this is not a bad ride. This is a BMW type of ride. It is well controlled, you know exactly what's going on, but it doesn't filter out everything that's happening beneath you. And I find it very comfortable and very secure feeling. It's also nice and quiet. We're running 60 miles an hour here. This road is a little bit wet. There's patches of snow here and there. There's some bumps, but this cabin is nice and quiet. And that's one of the differences between this car and an economy car that might be just as small. An economy car is not going to feel as solid and is not going to feel as quiet inside as the X1 does. You might think that a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine isn't enough motor for a car like this, but you'd be wrong. I mean, if you step on it and get off and go, the car will do 0 to 60 in 6.2 seconds, and it'll break the quarter mile in under 15. So it's a pretty quick car. But more important than how fast it is how responsive it feels. Now we have an 8-speed automatic, and the idea behind the 2-liter and the 8-speed is to get good fuel economy. So this powertrain basically tries to get into the upper gears as quickly as possible. And a lot of cars do that now, searching for fuel economy, and some of them, when you toe into the throttle, they don't do much. In the case of this X1, however, as soon as you step in, the transmission immediately kicks down, the boost comes up, and the car starts accelerating. And it's very proportional. I mean, you go in a little bit more, and goes down 2 or 3 gears. In fact, this transmission can downshift 3 or 4 gears all at once if necessary. So despite that small engine and the tall gearing, it's a very responsive package. So if you feel like driving in a little more sporting fashion, you can shift over into the sport mode by moving the transmission selector to the left. And in the sport mode, typically it runs 1 or 2 gears lower than it would in the standard mode, and it also downshifts a little more readily. So if you're in a hurry or you're on a winding road, sport mode is the place to be. You can also, once you're in the sport mode, shift it completely manually. By going fore and aft, it puts you into manual mode. In the instrument cluster, it shows you what gear you're in. Right now we're in 5th gear and there's a big M5 displayed there. Upshift to 6th, it goes to 6th. Go down twice, down to 4th, and you have full manual control of your gears, and it will stay in this manual mode until you move the selector back to the right, putting you back into sort of the normal mode. One of the other really nice things about this X1 is that since it's based on the last generation 3 Series, it still has the hydraulic power steering. And most of us think the hydraulic power steering is a little bit more responsive and a little more communicative than the new electric power steering. Everybody's going towards the electric power steering because it improves fuel economy a little bit. You're not driving a power steering pump all the time whether you need it or not. But when you're on uneven terrain, the electric power steering just sort of completely filters out what's going on at the front tires, while with the hydraulic steering you can still feel it a little bit. And this is one of the last new BMWs that still has the hydraulic power steering. Now we're on a road now that's part of Car and Driver's 10 Best Evaluation loop. And it's 1 lane either way, and it's recently been repaved, but there's just a lot of uneven pavement here. I mean, the basic terrain is uneven, and we've got we're going uphill, we're going downhill, there's just a lot of lumpiness in this road, and it's a really good test of a car's straight line stability and also of its suspension control. And in this X1, I mean, we're clearly feeling that we're moving around on this road, but the body is under good control. I never feel like the car is about to get away from me. I feel like in a secure location, and I can very, very easily direct this car. That's the kind of security and sort of tied to the road feeling that you expect with the BMW, and the X1 delivers fully. This X1 is a 28i, and that means it's powered by BMW's 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. Now you can't see much of the engine because there's a big plastic cover on it, and by the way it says twin power, but there's really only a single turbocharger. But it's called the 28i because it makes 240 horsepower and 255 foot-pounds of torque. And in BMW speak, that's about the power they figure a 2.8-liter regular engine would make. But this is a very, very sophisticated motor. Not only is it turbocharged, it has direct fuel injection, which means it pumps fuel directly into the cylinder at up to 2,900 psi. It has 4 valves per cylinder, variable valve timing, and it has what BMW calls Valvetronic, which is variable valve lift. And by changing how far the intake valve opens, that's how the engine power is controlled rather than through a throttle plate. And that also improves the efficiency of the engine. Now you can't really see it here, but this motor is longitudinal. It's not crosswise. And that's important because what that says is this is a rear drive architecture car. It's all-wheel drive, but it's based on a rear drive car. It has roughly 50-50 weight distribution, and most of the time, unless you're slipping, most of that power goes to the rear wheels. Behind the engine is an 8-speed automatic made by ZF, which is used by BMW almost across the board. It's a lovely transmission. It gives you a very low first gear to give you good acceleration, a very tall 8th gear, so you run at very low RPM on the highway, which is good for fuel economy. And if you look here, you see nice little details like this item, which is an oil-water heat exchanger. It uses the engine coolant to help warm up the oil when the engine is cold and to keep the oil from getting too warm when you're really running hard. That's the kind of detail you expect in a BMW and what you pay extra for. You might notice how far back this engine is in the engine bay, but there's a lot of extra space here. Well, that's because this is a 28i with the 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, and there's also a 35i, and that has the 3-liter 6-cylinder turbocharged engine with 300 horsepower. This is where the extra 2 cylinders go. One of the main reasons for buying an SUV-like vehicle is practicality, so let's check out the back seat. This driver's seat is set for me right now. And as you can see, I fit behind it, but I don't have a ton of knee room. I wouldn't be crossing my legs in this car. But my knees aren't into the seat back. The seat is comfortable. It's a good height off the floor, and I've got plenty of headroom. So we can definitely carry 4 adults in this car, at least to go out to dinner, if not to go to San Francisco. The X1 has a good sized luggage area, and if we remove this cargo cover and filled it all the way up to the roof, you could put about twice as much stuff here as you can in a 3 Series trunk. But there's more. That back seat folds down, and you can fold down the right side all by itself, or the center section all by itself, or the left and the center together. So there's a lot of versatility, and you can end up with it all folded down for really a lot of cargo, or leave room for 1 passenger back there and have the rest folded down to just expand your luggage capacity. The overall interior styling in the X1 is familiar to anyone who's been in recent BMWs. It's not quite as plush as some of the newer models, but then again, this is one of the less expensive BMWs, and I would say that this interior finish is probably a little bit nicer than the last generation 3 Series. On this Sportline car, we have this black trim on the dash that's sort of this piano black. It's very attractive. We've got red stitching on the doors and on the seats. There's a sports seat here. This happens to have the leather seats in this particular car. But this is sort of a classic German interior in which it's not overly designed, it's not overly plush, but it's very, very high quality and very tasteful. The reason for all of the high-tech powertrain, the 2-liter turbo engine with all the exotic features and the 8-speed automatic, is fuel economy. And this X1 is rated at 24 city, 33 highway, and that's for this all-wheel drive version. And those are pretty good numbers. That's right in the ballpark of what something like a Honda CR-V or a Ford Escape will get, except this is a little bit faster than those cars. Everybody cares about fuel economy these days with the price of gas. And even if the customers don't care that much, the manufacturers do. Because at this point, the manufacturers are all on the hook to get their fleets up to 50 miles per gallon by 2025 or so. And you don't do that overnight. You kind of get started on it gradually. And this is part of the gradual start, where more and more of this technology is filtering into cars like this X1 in order to improve the fuel economy. And with BMW, the trick is they've got to get the fuel economy up without hurting that sparkling performance that's always sold BMWs in the past. I think they've done a great job on this X1 in that regard. One thing you will notice if you're an old BMW buyer is that this has the iDrive in it, and it has the latest version of the iDrive. It's actually a lot easier to use than the older version. There's a couple of things that make it a lot more user-friendly. One is that there's a very simple menu structure to it. If you simply move the knob to the left, you end up with the main menu, and you have a list of things that the iDrive can control. And if you want to go into navigation, you just press navigation at that point, and there you are on the map. If you want to actually do something in navigation, you can go off to the left, and there you go with entering an address or looking at your last destinations. Whenever you want to go back, you just go to the left. You can hit points of interest, go on and so forth. It's very, very easy to use system. And of course, it also has voice activation. And you can do a lot of things with your voice rather than trying to dial away while you're driving. Let me give you an example. I'm pressing the voice activation control on the steering wheel. Enter address.
Please say the house number in single digits, followed by the street, the city, and the state.
2002 Hogback Road, Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Processing your input.
Takes a little bit of time sometimes.
(2002 Hogback Road, Ann Arbor, Michigan). Start guidance or add as another destination.
Start guidance.
Route guidance started.
And that's as simple as that.
The road for 3/4 of a mile.
And that's the address to the old Car and Driver office where the magazine was for over 30 years. We're on the interstate and it indicated 80 miles an hour, and this is a quiet cabin. and that's one of the things you expect in a BMW. And it's nice to have a small car that has that BMW level of silence. Now, it's not as quiet as a 7 Series would be at this speed, but it's pretty quiet, and it's the sort of cabin that you could spend just hours in driving along like this. Now, of course, I said the X1 was quiet at 80 miles an hour indicated. In fact, that's only 77 miles per hour according to the GPS in my radar detector. And this is a problem with just about all modern BMWs. For some reason or other, they always read 3 to 4 miles per hour high on the highway. And it's a problem that very few other car makers have these days. A Chevrolet, for example, has a perfect speedometer. It's never off more than a mile per hour at any speed, and pretty much so does Mercedes-Benz. But BMW, for some reason or other, just likes to be giving you a little bit more speed than you're actually traveling, and I wish they would trust you with more accurate information. One big question about the X1 is it a car or is it an SUV? We've already talked about that height, and I just don't think of this as an SUV because it's just not high enough off the ground. Also, it's the only BMW X model that's available with rear drive. X3 and X5 are all-wheel drive only, which also suggests that it's really more of a car than an SUV. But whatever you think of it, there's a lot to like about the X1. It's small, it's nimble, and it drives beautifully. It drives just like a 3 Series. And there's really not that much downside to it. It is a couple 100 pounds heavier than a current 3 Series, and because it's a little higher off the ground, it doesn't handle quite as crisply. Also, you've got to consider the price of these cars. The X1 starts at about $31,500, but like all BMWs, you can really load them up. With all-wheel drive, we're a little over $33,000 already, and this car has a lot of options and actually stickers at $45,000. So it can get expensive if you're not judicious in the options you pick. In the end, if you like a premium car, one that drives beautifully and feels very high quality, but is small and still has practicality, this X1 is a great choice. I'm Csaba Csere. See you next time.